going to be talking today about Amazon advertising, especially as it relates to Prime Day. So obviously this is a super quarter with Prime Day starting things off, moving into Turkey 5, holiday shopping, all exacerbated by COVID and the social distancing and how that changes consumer behavior. So extremely important quarter. Q4 always is, but especially now because it's going to change how your strategy goes forward after Q4, when Q1 starts, when 2021 rolls around. So this conversation today is all around those types of strategies, touching a little bit on the high level, but also getting a little granular into some of the advertising strategies that our experts are recommending. So want to thank everybody for joining today. This is going to be an hour discussion. If we do run with a couple minutes early, then we'll give you your time back. But to keep the conversation going, we're going to work without questions for this hour. With that said, if you have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to use that Q&A box in your toolbar there, and we'll be able to get back to you with those questions after the webinar. Any one of the experts on this panel would be happy to have their teams talk with you about your business and figure out how to best answer any questions you might have. We are going to be recording this session, so make sure you stick around, because at the very end, those who have attended, we're going to send them an email with this recording, so you'll have that to send to your respective teams. And with that, let me see if there's anything else I need to add. I don't think so. I'm going to drop this screen share here so you can look at all the panelists. John, you're going to have to find some way to talk clearly about the two Nichs. We got two Nichs. Yeah.
It's all good. I'll use Nick and then initial. I've already already considered that, so easy enough.
Cool. I'll hand
kick things off, Garrett.
Yeah, let's do it. Go ahead and start.
Yeah, great. Okay, so I'll quickly introduce myself and then I'll let the panelists introduce themselves. So I'll be moderating this today. My name's John Ghiorso. I am the founder and CEO of Orca Pacific. For those of you who don't know, we are a full service agency with an exclusive focus on Amazon. And we are now part of the S4 Mighty Hive family of companies. So we have three great panelists on with us today. I'll let them introduce themselves. David Grill, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Thanks, John. So David Grill, I'm a senior advertising manager here at Orca Pacific. Been with the company for about 3 years now. And my primary role is focused around the sponsored ad console, so Amazon PPC, as well as Amazon's demand side platform, programmatic media, display, video, OTT, a number of other new betas involved there. So really, I'm focused every day on building, planning, managing, reporting, optimizing full funnel ad strategies as it relates to our clients' Amazon's business, and really trying to maximize the potential of every dollar that we're spending.
Awesome. Nick W.
Hi guys, I'm Nick W, or Nich Weinheimer. I'm the general manager of Kenshu eCommerce. Kenshu is an advertising platform that's been around since about 2006. Got our start building an enterprise ad tech platform for Google search management. Had Facebook as a large client, and a lot of folks left Facebook, left Google, went to Facebook, and said, "Hey, Kenshu, launch a social product." So we did that in around 2009, and then right around 2015, we were having some good conversations with the leadership at Amazon Advertising to pivot our enterprise ad stack towards the Amazon opportunity. I came on board shortly thereafter as we launched the business at the end of 2017 to help scale up the e-com business unit at Kenshu. So I think enterprise ad stack license our product to brands and agencies to better scale their advertising performance on various channels, but in my case, Amazon, also Walmart, and soon to be quite a few other retailers that will be launching through our platform. Glad to be here with you guys today, John. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. All right, the second Nick, Nich Seo.
And up the rear. Hey guys, nice to meet everyone. My name is Nich Seo. I'm a senior partner manager at Mighty Hive, looking after our global Amazon partnership, primarily focused on programmatic and measurement solutions within Amazon. And to kind of back up a bit, Mighty Hive is a digital advertising and marketing services company offering data and digital media consultancy to brands and agencies alike. And as John had mentioned earlier on, obviously having merged with Orca Pacific underneath the S4 portfolio to offer services that are kind of cross-technology platforms inclusive of Amazon.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. Yeah, great, great group of people we have here today. Okay, awesome. So let's kind of start out maybe higher level. Nich Weinheimer, give us maybe an overview of what's happened this year on the advertising side of things with Amazon, and then maybe what are your expectations for the rest of this year?
Sure. So let's fast forward back 122 years to January at CES. The world is responding to what's happened with Amazon advertising throughout really the coming out party of 2018, strong growth in 2019. I mean, to give you some context, the advertisers that came on our platform in 2018 were seeing same store growth of 100%. So they'd be doubling their spend coming on to an enterprise ad tech platform, seeing that there's huge opportunity to have better transparency and control over their digital shopper marketing dollars on a key retail channel for them in Amazon. Amazon really trained brands and their agencies to take advantage of these kind of transparent digital shopper marketing opportunities. That continued to grow through 2019. We all had plans in the beginning of 2020 for that to continue to grow. We've seen a ton of change, and I'm sure we'll hear that from David on some of the specifics, and Nick, especially on the display front. So a lot of exciting things going into 2020. The advent of some new ad types, some new targeting types. All brands were ready to kind of rise with that tide, scale up. Sellers were starting to take advantage of some new display opportunities, but enter the anomalous era of COVID in March. I think a lot of folks were tracking that news, but then when it really became an issue in the U.S. and certainly quite a large issue if you've been keeping your finger on the pulse, we saw a huge spike in the kind of, call it the toilet paper gate scandal in March. On Amazon specifically, and Amazon for their part, and I thought it was a smart move, really held their hand close on the dial to how they managed their ad yield during that surge in demand. If you look at some of the numbers, they were largely able to keep a lot of their kind of average metrics in position. They certainly dropped some yield down in sponsored products. They suppressed some terms like toilet paper, for example, to try to protect the consumer and the consumer experience and not have too much ad load in a world where folks are just trying to protect themselves by ordering the safest way possible, through e-commerce. I think in general, brands still, even through that, were able to recover. A lot of the larger brands were able to pivot their potentially some of their more linear or physical investments in stores towards their digital shopper marketing efforts. And to the degree they had those coffers, they were making those shifts more quickly than some of the sellers who potentially didn't have the depth of investment capital available to pivot so quickly, or were just struggling with inventory challenges coming out of a downstream, COVID era in China. So there was a lot that went into kind of the dip into April, but the recovery was pretty swift as brands did figure out that there was a surge of opportunity on Amazon of just organic traffic. And as Amazon ratcheted back up some of those ad placements, started to, we've seen as a general trend an expansion of yield in the sponsored brands ad type, as well as how that ad type is evolving into kind of tying together a holistic video strategy. And so those additional placements have made that a little bit more efficient. But in general, the brands, have been very fast to be educated on what they want out of this space. I would say probably the biggest thing that I've seen in how we develop our product based on customer demand is really this holistic approach to, data intelligence, where advertising is the largest lever that a brand can pull, but it needs to be rationalized alongside the retail analytics that they're pulling from Amazon, alongside the data that they're potentially acquiring from third parties that are, effectively scraping the site to give them competitive intelligence and other data points that Amazon won't deliver natively, and potentially trying to integrate data from their own systems to try to understand what is truly profitable for me versus, what I might get from a metric that Amazon would share with me from a ROAS perspective.
So Nick, so just to kind of jump in, so basically we saw this kind of immediate knee-jerk reaction with brands pulling back ad spend in kind of March, April. A lot of that's recovered to this point. Is that a fair summary? And then, like, where do you see it going? Like, what is the trend today in July and August? Like, if you were to kind of project out the rest of the year, does it get more competitive than ever? Is it still kind of in equilibrium because there's more opportunity, but budgets are restricted because of economic impact? How do you see that kind of playing out?
Yeah, so the recovery was pretty swift from a budget perspective. I think there was, as most organizations had to, they kind of had to go into the workshop, figure out how they were going to pivot for their own concerns and needs. And we as an organization did something very similar. Seeing where the opportunity was and that there was as much demand as Amazon has driven, I think the recovery was swift. And there's a lot of brands out there leveraging advertising technology that very quickly shows you, forecasts and things like that tell you, hey, you've got opportunity, your performance is strong. And then as a counterpart, you've got a platform dealing with this surge in demand where they literally can have their hand on a dial saying, how much yield do I want to present so that I can maintain kind of the economics that these brands are looking for, instead of having huge swings way in and out of, oh, there's huge opportunity now or a major, lack. So I think generally speaking at a macro level, we're surfing a pretty large organic wave that makes the advertising opportunity very valuable. We're also seeing in the new to brand metric that comes out of the sponsored brands ad type, across our index, generally, just to give you an idea, about 6% of orders that were derived from a click on a sponsored brand ad, which is that headline unit. About 6% of those orders were new to brand in the latter part of 2019. As the COVID spike happened in March and then kind of came, to its bottom in mid-April and then was climbing pretty quickly through through May, the recovery through April and May, we're hovering at a 12 to 14% new to brand order index. So that says a couple things.
Why is that? Yeah.
So that says a couple things. One, net new shoppers on Amazon. These are folks who may never have taken the plunge into becoming an Amazon shopper, but now they're sheltering in place and their habits are changing. And that could be demographic. That could be a number of different reasons. Another thing that has happened to a lot of brands, if there are any on this call, they're especially sellers that are, not enormous organizations, you may have run into inventory issues. And I may be a loyalist to a certain type of product on Amazon, but it's not in stock. And so I'm going to buy the next best available product. And therefore I'm trying a new to brand product. I'm more open as long as I can get it. I'll convert. So there's a couple of different kind of ideas of why that is, but certainly from kind of a volume perspective, if you look at kind of like October sort of height is sort of the beginning of Q4. Generally, if you looked at 2019, we hit October numbers as, relatively speaking, way sooner this year than we usually do. So that's a good sign as well, that from just a demand perspective. I mean, a lot of people said it's 4 years in 2 months. I mean, in terms of adoption, and certainly that we haven't seen that abate.
Okay, awesome. David Grill, switching gears a little bit here, you're obviously someone who's in this platform, working through it every day. From your perspective, what are some of the things that have really changed this year, and what are some of the things that have stayed the same, and kind of where do you expect Amazon advertising to go for the rest of this year?
Yeah, so just listing off one major item that continues to change, just the inventory on Amazon O&O properties. So desktop, mobile web, their shopping app, and Amazon always having the pulse on latest and greatest testing for their sponsored products, sponsored brand, video, any ad inventory on the site or across their shopping platforms. And this is important to keep an eye on. I mean, just like any major publisher would do, you're always testing new configurations. You want to maximize, the revenue coming in from each click, each impression. And so, just making sure that you keep a close eye on this, as it can have an impact on just your ability to serve impressions. Obviously, it'll impact cost per clicks over time. If, for example, there are historically 3 or 4 top of search sponsored product placements, and then tomorrow Amazon switches to test, a 2 by 4 by 6 scenario at the top, middle, and bottom of the search results. So that has had an impact over time. Actually, we lean on Kenshu to help kind of identify when those changes happen based on automated actions for share of voice drops or share of impression drops for top of search. So you can keep a closer eye on it from an automated standpoint, but within the categories, that we're managing, that, someone on the call may be managing, always just kind of searching those top keywords, ensuring that you're up to date on what those changes are.
So David, so what you're saying is, so Amazon's ad inventory, the different placements that they own and stand up on the site, are they changing more frequently than they used to? Are they expanding? Are they retracting? Like, just give
I
more.
would say at a high level, the amount of inventory remains fairly consistent at all times, but the configuration of that changes. And like just yesterday, and even today, for a lot of top volume driving non-brand category keywords on the site, seeing very prominent sponsored brand video ad above the fold, which hardly doesn't ever happen, at least when I'm on the site. I usually find that desktop below the fold, bottom of page 1. It varies across their shopping app versus desktop, but that's one example where it may not have an immediate impact, but if you're going from below the fold to above the fold overnight, that can have a pretty deep impact on conversion.
So basically, there's a lot of kind of testing, experimentation probably going on Amazon side that has real tangible impact on performance. So what you're saying is basically like, you have to pay attention to this stuff daily, like, because even
Absolutely.
if you think, okay, we have our strategy, it's set, it's running, Amazon could make a switch. They're not going to tell you as the advertiser. They're just going to do it. And then that's going to have dramatic impacts on performance.
Yep.
Okay. Awesome. So, I know this call is talking about Prime Day Q4, so I want to make sure we focus on that. What are some of the things, David, that you're doing to right now to prepare for, to ramp into Prime Day, which is now in Q4. So I guess I could just say Q4, really.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, one major project that we're doing across a lot of our client base is just building out DSP audiences ahead of time. And so, with the plan to launch DSP, let's say in the next 15, 30 days, even just building out these a couple weeks in advance will allow us to get a jump start to build out larger audiences. And really just kind of segment where it makes sense based on the strategies we want to execute, the shoppers that we want to reach, whether it's, our own brand loyalists, retargeting, cross-sell, upsell, competitive conquesting. These can be created at an ASIN brand level. So, spending the time up front will have a huge payoff when it comes to Q4. And now you've also tested, you've optimized, you've learned what segments are working ahead of time most efficiently, so that when you do get into Q4, you can just double down on what you found to be successful.
Awesome. So audience segments, I think there have been fairly recent developments on just the ability to kind of create custom audiences, ways of segmenting customer data. How do you think about that? What's changed? What are you excited about on the DSP side?
Yeah, so specifically, just the ASIN level segments that you can create within the platform. Really, I think of it, it's a similar approach to the sponsored product attribute targeting, where you hand select competitive ASINs or your own ASINs from a defensive standpoint. And you execute strategies accordingly. And you can have different messaging scenarios per audience bucket. And that's where, you can see just more relevancy, higher engagement, ultimately higher conversion, and really being able to have this one-to-one relationship with each audience individually, as opposed to in the past where it was still in market segments, but that's very broad given price points and competition within a specific category. So now being able to, for example, have creative that speaks to an in-market shopper from an upsell perspective versus an in-market shopper just from a lateral move from a similarly priced competitive product. So Nick, I know you have a lot of experience in this area, Nick S, as well as Nick W, but if you want to jump in on any audience targeting as well.
Yeah, actually, that'd be great. Nich Seo, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of to add to what David was mentioning, so you do have kind of granularly specific shopping interactions that you can set for the audiences, be it product views, product searches, product purchases. In that product purchase in particular only meant for suppression audiences. But I think the notes that David was adding relative to kind of the pre-lead the pre-lead kind of lead up period, I guess, if you want to call it that, before the holiday season, it's definitely kind of an opportunity to mine those insights. I think even kind of connecting it back to, I believe it was Andrew Gilliland's question earlier about specific software recommendations. I think if you have tools that provide you with market intelligence, share of voice analysis, it definitely is a very competitive tool to allow you to actually start creating your audiences ahead of time, to actually start to conquest brands that actually might be the incumbent within a given category. So we definitely do see a lot of clients taking advantage of that. And then for the endemic brands or sellers that also do have their own brand.com experience, we also always recommend placing pixels down on their sites as well. And then from that, you can generate your own first party audiences and generate then overlap insights that then show you kind of alignment between your own first party data on your brand.com towards that of in-market and lifestyle segments as well. The one note that I will add that tends to be somewhat of a challenge, I think, when it comes to some of the newer audience capabilities is the inability to apply third-party tracking. So for the ASIN audiences in particular, that would be blocked altogether from that third-party integration. But not to kind of get ahead of ourselves here, that definitely does lend itself to some of the developments being made on the measurement side with Amazon as it relates to tools like Amazon Attribution, Amazon Marketing Cloud, et cetera, which actually do allow kind of a closer look or more transparent view into the actual measurement components of advertising when you don't actually have that third-party integration possible.
Okay, that's great. So kind of along those lines, what are your thoughts on creative, both in terms of kind of during peak season as well as, you know, should brands be testing creative with DSP in terms of a lead up to peak?
Yeah, I think it's always an interesting question we have with clients just based on the availability of different creative formats within Amazon's DSP. So we have the dynamic e-commerce ads, which kind of auto-generate specific, what looks like Amazon product listings in a way, but only have limitations with relative to showing one ASIN directing into a product detail page. So I would recommend, my Wi-Fi out, it might be, but we recommend, John, am I still there, by the way?
Yeah, you broke up for a second, but I think you're good now.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah,
we recommend a combination of obviously utilizing the Amazon exclusive units, especially for some of the lower funnel strategies, in that it's aligned more particularly to kind of purchase conversions anyways. And then when it comes to some of the more broad prospecting, definitely leveraging custom assets and driving to destinations such as your brand store, et cetera. And I think even from a usability perspective, Amazon recently released what's called responsive e-commerce ads, which also are a lot more flexible, both from a scalable perspective, so being able to assign up to 20 ASINs and also create 10 flexible dimensions, but also allowing Amazon to kind of optimize of the catalog that you associate, kind of which product will lead to higher conversions. So I think that's kind of from a creative perspective, at least on the display side. And then video also has kind of very corollary types of formats to kind of leverage as well.
So basically all of the different ways of doing ad creative at this point, they all have use cases. It's not this one is bad, this one's always better. So depending on the situation, they all have still kind of a role to play potentially as an advertiser.
Yeah, I would definitely say so. And I think that potentially is one misconception at the beginning, is that you just want to leverage DEAs for everything. But again, in some cases they do drive performance across the funnel, but I think there is a use case across all the different formats that you're able to upload into the system.
Okay, awesome. You know, Nick, I know you talk a lot about this kind of endemic, non-endemic concept, and just to define terms here for anyone. So endemic would be somebody that sells stuff on Amazon, so a consumer product brand. Non-endemic would be a brand that does not actually sell anything on Amazon, so consumer service company, you know, banks, airlines, insurance companies, etc. Does seasonality, Q4 especially, does that play a role for non-endemic? Does it matter if you're going to sign up for, you know, a new bank account or insurance plan or whatever? Does Q4 play a role?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even just relative to one of the value propositions, or kind of the primary value proposition for non-endemics when it comes to Amazon advertising on the DSP side, is going to be the audience data. And I think with Q4 in mind, there's generally just a surge in Amazon retail anyway. So I think the data that a brand has access to is that much richer. And then with the ASIN audiences that we had mentioned previously, those are now available to non-endemic brands as well. So for insurance, something that comes to mind pretty quickly is just moving. So home and renters insurance. So being able to actually create audiences that are specific to moving boxes, moving tape, etc., are things that a lot of our non-endemic clients look to actually be able to propel any of their services forward. That said, I know that Nick W had mentioned kind of the calibration then of kind of endemic brands on Amazon and kind of seeing a spike again, kind of calibration there. Non-endemics, I think for the most part, are still taking a longer time to kind of rebound, if you will. But again, specifically depending on the vertical or category, travel, for example, is kind of really hit hard. So I think that is playing a factor into kind of what we're seeing for Q4 this year on the non-endemic side. But COVID aside, I think definitely there's a lot of utilization from Amazon, particularly during Q4.
Okay, awesome. Let's kind of jump around a little bit here, but Nich Seo, stay with you. So OTT. So talk to us. Just give us kind of the overview, high level opinion, and then what's interesting for you, what's exciting, what's changing there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to kind of connect that back to your question, I think you would ask David about kind of where we've seen some growth on the Amazon advertising side or kind of developments. I think with Amazon in particular, they're really tapping into kind of their first party assets. And what I mean by that is both from a data perspective, but also kind of a device perspective. So with Amazon in the CTV space, they have Fire TV. So with that in particular, and also the acceleration of digital consumption in a time of COVID, we're just seeing a lot of demand and supply, both equally on the OTT side. And with that in particular, I think the real benefit that Amazon has within kind of its closed ecosystem with single sign-on is the ability of addressability and also attribution. So what I mean by addressability is being able to actually target Amazon audiences and your first party audiences in an OTT environment, which across a lot of different technologies isn't necessarily as possible or as seamless. So other technologies obviously having some type of third party unified ID or cohort. Amazon actually has that first party identity link. And then second thing, kind of being related to that same concept, is going to be attribution. So typically OTT is always kind of seen as a branding play, and not that it shouldn't be, but that is also kind of a default in that you can't tie back OTT media to any kind of mid-funnel or even lower funnel conversions or activity, both on Amazon or your brand.com. But by virtue of having the single sign-on, Amazon's actually able to tie back that activity of the impression or video view on OTT back to activity on your website, on your browser, et cetera. So I think that's a huge value proposition for brands right now, is being able to better evaluate the measurement side of OTT that Amazon's been able to provide.
So, I mean, right now, if I'm a brand and I'm selling, fishing gear, and I want to target people that watch fishing shows, I can do that as a brand right now via the technology that Amazon has enabled.
Yes and no. From a supply perspective, it's not as easy as saying, hey, I want to target this app. For the most part, Amazon's OTT offering is still kind of run of network. You do have the ability to blacklist apps as of recently, which by proxy, you can then create a whitelist by doing the opposite. Yeah. But from an audience perspective, you can actually, I think, by obviously doing the ASIN audiences, you can by proxy create a fishing audience and kind of target that in an OTT space. So less contextual, but more behavioral. And you also do have the ability to create private deals through Amazon Publisher Services within Fire TV. So I guess you do have the contextual capabilities through private deals. And then you also do have the behavioral capabilities when it comes to audience targeting.
Okay, cool.
Just John, if I can riff a little bit on what Nick S was saying, I think, he made the great point around the, it's kind of unified ID that obviously inside the Amazon walled garden, they have the ability to help you measure across everything. And I think something that we may touch on more in your conversation that they're working on to underpin all of that is the Amazon Marketing Cloud, to really give this clean room environment built on an AWS instance per brand to look at the event level across potentially in the future. Right now it's all DSP focused, but in the future across potentially all of your Amazon advertising investments down to the event level. So the user click or impression for, through the path to purchase, to be able to kind of map, all right, where is this given user? I can start to look at how I structure my investment across the funnel relative to where I see the users engage and then convert relative to those different funnel steps. And they're really starting to merge the funnels together. Like DSP is kind of one ship going this way, SPA is coming this way. Yeah. We see a little bit about posts in the mid funnel, but that marketing cloud isn't intended to just stop at Amazon in the end. And as I keep kind of pushing on this notion, and as Nick did about Amazon attribution, as we start driving more investment in external channels, driving into our Amazon ecosystem, that Amazon Marketing Cloud is intended to be open such that you can push that data into the Amazon Marketing Cloud and start to get a full picture. You know, you can be driving click streams in from your social or search businesses and really starting to map together how that then engages in the media that you spend on Amazon. So you start to know, what is that path to purchase starting to actually look like for my consumers, and less of this guessing game of like, is it incremental? Well, I don't know, because there's no geo for my sponsored products, but I might be able to kind of run an incrementality test on my upper funnel, but I really don't have the event level sales data to kind of tell you with enough statistical significance in sales on the upper funnel that you know, it truly is incremental. And so you see Amazon really maturing rapidly in the tech stack that they're building to kind of solve for those big questions that are going to be that next step, not the 7 to 8 figure sales business, but the step that's going to get the brands to say, you know what, actually it does make sense for me to invest 2, 3 times as much as I am today, because I can map everything and its value back to my sales.
So let's stay on this marketing cloud thing for a minute, Nick, because I think it's really interesting. So I mean, maybe even to take a step kind of further back here. So I guess the problem right now that Marketing Cloud is meant to solve is one of what? These different ad properties being sort of siloed in terms of, you know, you have search over here and display over here, and they're not necessarily directly connected. You have other things like brand store and attribution, kind of other elements of the platform and data streams. Is the idea to kind of bring all of those together into a unified view and place?
I think that is certainly one of the main reasons behind it. I think the other being that, you know, if you run your own analytics on your own site, you can see down to the kind of the user level clickstream, you know, kind of flow of the data. You can see all the inputs from your different marketing channels. You have that level of granularity to truly understand. You get native metrics from channels like Google for impressions. I mean, there are things that Amazon as a retailer is loath to share with the brands that are investing in their site. One of those key things is getting that level of granularity. Today, we rely as brands, as agencies serving brands, on kind of what Amazon gives us as the roll-up of the reporting. There isn't that level of granularity to say, okay, for this user ID across these different investments that I'm making, okay, that's an interesting, like, what is the performance? When is the performance? And that when is kind of one of the first things that they're really starting to create value around. Like right now with just DSP in there, getting that event level data, you can start to see throughout the day very specifically kind of how impressions are being served, and therefore think about, well, okay, my day parting strategy might consider being quite different because I'm able to analyze it very much more granularly than I had just being given a daily roll up of performance. So just with that intraday kind of view of the reporting, you could now go over to your sponsored products campaigns and know that, like, Amazon, for whatever reason, seems to be modulating my impression delivery for my DSP campaigns relative to these demand signals that we're seeing. And you have to imagine that their algorithm on serving those impressions is going to be trying to exact as much value as they can out of the opportunity. So we're seeing a lot of brands, that's kind of the first foray into it. But then you start thinking about layering, whether it's retail signals at the event level, like sales data. We as a technology provider already have an incrementality testing SaaS product that we could plug into the top of an AWS, API-based product like Amazon Marketing Cloud is.
Sure.
So we're not quite there yet, but that's the background. I don't know if Nick S, if you have other background with them. That
I actually do want to go to Nich Seo, but one more question before I do, and it's just a very practical one. Who has access to this right now? I know we do collectively, but from a brand perspective, if you're not using an agency, do you have to use an agency? Do you have to be a top 100 brand? Like, can you just go use it? How is this working today?
Amazon's flow is you can. They have somewhat of a kind of a repeated history where they have strong relationships with some of the world's largest brands that obviously they want to maintain. Largely, a lot of those largest brands have existing relationships with their agencies like yourselves, some of the holding companies. So when these new programs come out, they tend to release these sort of quiet betas and say, hey, we're working on this. We don't have the team built out to support a GA. Like Amazon Attribution beta has been in beta for 2 years now. So, you know, they have this like very focused data-driven approach to when and if we prove something out and the math shows to scale, all right, you can now hire the team to support it. So delivering the MVP to some of the largest brands that they, you know, who have been asking the most, a squeaky wheel is largely a lot of it. And generally it's associated with your level of investment in the platform. So I'm spending these many millions on DSP. They're gonna be like, hey, have you heard of Marketing Cloud? We're really trying to answer your concerns, and please help us build it because we need to hear from you. Because they are customer obsessed in that way, just as we are in what we build at Kenshu.
Yeah. Okay.
And so the thing that I would add to that. Oh, sorry, John.
Idea that, no, go ahead, Nick. Go ahead.
No, the thing that I was going to add is I think in addition to kind of it being limited currently in a closed beta, I think when they look to partners in particular, there's a certain skill set just relative to capabilities. So be it primarily from an engineering perspective, having investment resources there, and then also from a data science perspective as well to actually do analysis on top of the log level files. So I think if you were to look at the list of beta partners in particular, it's a blend of both tool providers like Kenshu and then also service providers like Mighty Hive who do have the capabilities in-house to do that analysis on behalf of brands. And if brands do have those capabilities in-house as well, I'm sure Amazon would be more than willing to work with them, I think. But to complement Nick's point, it has certain requirements relative to Amazon advertising investment as a qualifier.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Nick. And that's actually kind of where I was going. This is not low-hanging fruit stuff. I mean, this is like you've picked all the low-hanging fruit. You're ready to get really like, you know, super sophisticated, and you have the resources to actually execute on that and get, you know, a better ROI, get a better experience. But
and the team
of scale is not going to.
The team inside Amazon that's building this also is aspirational too. So they're going to say, hey, P&G, like, please use Marketing Cloud or some other large brand, right? And they're like, they're in the beta, but you know, when we talk to them, we're like, hey, are you working? You know, these are a few of our clients that want to, well, yeah, we gave them access, but they're not doing anything with it yet, which is great. To Nick's point, it's like, unless you have the expertise to like, you know, do the monkeying around with all the data to figure out what's going on here and help them innovate their product, they're aspirational because they want this product to take off and they want to go back and, you know, tell their leadership, hey, look, you know, how much adoption we've got. And so they're very keen to partner with the experts at Mighty Hive, with the engineers we have. And we've been running tracking technology on Amazon Attribution. It's such a great partnership because we've been doing that for 15 years. And we say, hey, we're looking ahead to the server side. Like, this cookieless future is real and you guys are building a whole product. I mean, what is this going to look like? So, I would say that they're definitely both aspirational as well as like looking for, to Nick's point, the expertise.
And it's exactly that. I think it's definitely been a partnership in that I think there's a lot of white space with Amazon Marketing Cloud right now. I think from a full-blown data cleanroom perspective, so obviously corollaries in the market being Google's Ads Data Hub, Facebook has their own cleanroom as well. Amazon's just starting out, and I think Nick had mentioned this, but only DSP data is currently available, with roadmap then including sponsored ads in the coming months, hopefully. But again, looking to expand that beyond just Amazon advertising, including things like third-party media, CRM data, what have you. And I think right now, Amazon's definitely looking to brands as kind of what would be useful for them. So I think working through partners like Mighty Hive and Kenshu, they're definitely looking to build their roadmap on the go almost as they build investment. So if anyone who is attending has a general interest and thoughts as to how they utilize that data and information, I definitely encourage people to reach out both to Kenshu, Mighty Hive, Orca Pacific, etc.
Hey everyone, John Ghiorso here. I hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. I wanted to let you know that this episode has been brought to you by Orca Pacific, the agency I founded to help brands succeed on the Amazon platform. If you need any services that relate to success on the platform, whether it be content, advertising, SEO, help on the back end when it comes to operational support, etc., feel free to reach out to our team. The best way to get in touch with us is on LinkedIn. And with that, we'll get back to the show. Okay, let's switch gears to the search side of things a little bit. So David Grill, again, obviously doing this, full time, more than full time. What are some of the things that you think when you kind of think about new clients that you onboard? you know, when you kind of talk out to the marketplace, what are some of the things that brands are missing? And you know, I want to touch on budgeting, on long tail keyword strategies. Like, what is not consensus at this point that you think is something that most brands should be paying attention to or doing differently?
Yeah, great question. So, you know, from my perspective, just, and there's a few things that come to mind, but share of voice in general is becoming more and more important on the platform. And I mean, we see it time and time again when, you know, you move away from the immediate ROAS view and you're more concerned about gaining share, specifically page one organic share, and improving that over time, bumping more listings from page 2 to page 1, page 3 to page 2 to page 1, and repeating that process with your catalog against a wide number of high value, high volume keywords has an immediate and significant impact just on the overall business. And it's not just for those products, it's for the entire catalog. And that concept is missed quite often and requires a lot of education because it's just not the normal way of thinking about, you know, how to run an ad campaign and a successful business on Amazon to grow and scale your business. So that's number one. And kind of just when you're onboarding, you know, you're understanding where are you at today, where are the opportunities, and how do we get there, you know? And then that brings me into, you know, the budgeting piece, which there's a few different ways that we can kind of look at that and break it down. We could certainly do the historical model where we're just basing it off of a percentage of COGS. You know, what is the target? Typically, you know, a starting point might be 5 to 8%. More recently, that's 10 to 15% in some categories, highly competitive categories, or for these disruptor brands looking to make a huge impact. I mean, it could be upwards of 30, 40% of COGS invested. So it really depends on how aggressive you want to be. You could also look at it just as a percentage of the total business. Typically, Amazon advertising might make up about 20 to 30% of a client's business, sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on the size. But on average, that seems to be about the sweet spot. So, you know, you could back into what is the right ad spend based on that perspective. And lastly, where we're really trying to go with this is the performance-based model. We call it self-funding model, number of other terminology I'm sure that the industry uses, but essentially you had already hit it on the head earlier, John, just defining those KPIs up front. What is the overall goal, right? The growth target, the ROAS target, CPA, how does that relate back to profitability? You know, just ensuring that, you know, you're checking all the boxes. Once you have, again, the operations, the retail side, content, SEO, everything is in the best possible place. Obviously, that all continues to evolve over time, but as long as you're comfortable with where the business is at, and you've proven at a small scale or to a certain degree that advertising is helping to grow the business, you know, you can just build on that over time. And we've seen an incredible amount of success for any client that's willing to take that approach, because it plays very nicely with the share of voice model as well.
Yeah.
And you're tracking all of this simultaneously, multiple inputs to your optimizations. And so those are a few things that come to mind.
Yeah, that's great. So I want to stay on this topic a little bit. I've been thinking a lot about kind of second and third order impacts of advertising on the Amazon platform. You know, we all know this term flywheel and it gets thrown around a lot, but what that actually means is you do one thing and it causes another thing to happen. And then that thing causes another thing to happen. And if you do those other things as well, they all impact one another and something, you know, spins faster and faster, right? So when I think of advertising's impact on the Amazon flywheel, I think if you're thinking of spinning this wheel, the biggest kind of lever you have to spin it is advertising. But so often, because all the data, or the vast majority of the data that Amazon spits out is the first order impact data, what did I sell? How much did I sell? At what price? What was the ROAS? And so I think brands, advertisers can get kind of overly tunnel visioned into this just only kind of singular effect. People are also cynical. They think, well, yeah, sure, there's some other kind of magical second order impact that's hard to quantify, but that's just probably Amazon telling me to spend more money. Share of voice, organic share of voice is directly correlated to ad spend. Can you just talk about that a little bit more, and like, what is the impact and how do you think about it? How do we measure it? Is there a way to apply a specific dollar figure to that impact?
Yeah, so I mean, just in terms of measurement, we would typically load in a catalog and a number of tracked keywords that we want to keep an eye on in terms of trends over time. And this applies for share of voice. It also applies to just organic rank in general at an ASIN level by keyword. And so between those two outputs, you're able to, again, understand exactly what that progress is over time. And the alternative is also true, where you can understand, if I pull back on advertising, how does that reduce the flywheel and lose momentum, lose organic rank and relevancy over time? So typically we are, that is included into the overall consideration set when we are optimizing campaigns. Kenshu also has an awesome share of voice report that they've released. There's automated actions that can be completed based on that data. They're also ingesting the retail data, which, to your point, these other impacts, people so focused on that what is the immediate return, miss the bigger picture. And so that's definitely, something that we're keeping a close eye on over here.
Awesome. Nich Weinheimer, how do you think of share of voice?
I think it's something I wish Amazon shared natively. If you asked how expensive it is to maintain a solution that is playing the game of whack-a-mole, especially to the points earlier that David was making about how Amazon switches up their ad load on their site as they restructure their site. Anytime those site changes happen, if you or the provider that you use is trying to generate those data points for you, they're having to pivot and switch midstream. So there's a whole, I hesitate to call it a cottage industry. It's now a real industry that's based around, delivering this level of kind of near real-time intelligence. And if I can take a giant step back and go back to, not that giant, but like almost 10 years ago, in sort of the earlier days of, you could just be a retailer on Amazon as long as you had a good feed going into Amazon and you optimize it with SEO, you could grow your business on Amazon. And the first foray into getting that like real-time market intelligence was to use a dynamic repricer so that you could win the buy box against the next reseller of whatever the widget was that you were selling. It's interesting to see us kind of, as the larger brand manufacturers have sort of, kind of become more of the relevant entity on Amazon. It's been interesting to sort of see how they've demanded these kind of preemptive signals in how they manage their decision-making or their advertising decisions. And that starts with, we call it retail intelligence. And it's something that's kind of happening in, retail intelligent advertising. It's a trend that's happening not only just on Amazon advertising, but for retailers looking to sell products through primary channels like Google or Facebook to their own sites. There's this strong desire to have inputs up front before the advertising decisions are made, as opposed to saying, let me just get the data back. What did I get from clicks and conversions yesterday? And then I'll make optimizations today. There's a desire to have, what happened 15 minutes ago on my competitor's site? Are they on promotion for this key product that we both sell? And this is on the retail hat on here. If so, I'm going to pull back my Google spend today because they're on promotion. And if a savvy shopper is out there, I'm probably going to be less efficient with my ad spend. Similarly, I might adjust differently if that's the inverse of it. And the same is true on Amazon. To David's point, if we're providing those inputs more so on the front end, that hey, this data is coming in, and we're working on getting to where it's as frequent as possible. But if you can have those types of insights about those competitors coming into play, the price point that they're at when you're not in the buy box, those should be inputs that influence your bidding algos. It shouldn't just be impressions, clicks, and conversions being studied in a smart algo. Maybe you're clustering around keywords, and we do some really interesting stuff on that. But the retail intelligent aspect of it is really applying that end-to-end from the competitive intel, price intel, and then on the back end of that, the organic sales and the other parts of the business that aren't generally directly related to advertising. And then to your point, John, that gives you the full picture of how is that advertising lever affecting my whole flywheel? Am I spinning that wheel fast enough? And PSA here, if you're going through the mud and you're still, and all those things are right, you've got content, you've got a lot of advertising, you've got smart advertising going, you've got good retail intelligence, and you still feel the mud, go contact an attorney to help you figure out channel cleanup if you've got any gray market,
I was going to say,
so.
You've got pricing issues. Yeah. I agree with that. Okay, awesome. Brand stores, something that I know comes up a lot. I want to touch on, I don't want to go too deep into brand stores themselves since this is an advertising call, but in terms of, David, in terms of using brand stores as part of an advertising strategy, where does it fit? Where does a brand store fit in your sponsored ads and even DSP strategy?
Yeah, I mean, so back to what Nick S. was talking about earlier, just in terms of a destination for paid media, stores have a huge role in that path to purchase. And I'm a firm believer in stores. I mean, it's the only 100% brand owned content page microsite on Amazon where you get to the detail page, there's sponsored product widgets everywhere, frequently, merchandising widgets, etc., competitive ads. So it's just, there's a lot of noise everywhere else. And so if you can build out this really compelling, engaging microsite on Amazon and then leverage that for really every path in the point of purchase, from a product education standpoint, all the way down to driving conversion and measuring that impact, I see great success there. I think it also comes down to testing the different scenarios. Like we talked about A/B testing creative, A/B testing these destination strategies based on how people react to going straight to the detail page versus to the brand store experience. Maybe different shoppers at different stages in the funnel, would be better suited to go to different destinations. But in general, brand stores from the search side of things through sponsored brands primarily, from a branded search perspective, non-brand, a lot of opportunity to build out page specific campaigns or even wider campaigns that are targeted towards maybe a category level page that features then multiple product groups underneath. You're featuring multiple, products within your catalog in the ad itself. So a lot of opportunities there. And the same exists for DSP too. And I find for DSP retargeting specifically, I mean, and it could go either way in any scenario, but, I find that, it is sometimes a bit difficult. It can be difficult to scale a one-to-one retargeting campaign. So using the store where, you kind of have this like wider creative messaging. It's like, hey, we know you are in market for product X or this category, drive them back to the store where then they can find exactly what they were looking for and then also be exposed to your entire catalog at the same time to promote that basket building and cross-sell opportunity. So Nick, any other thoughts on just brand stores, destination for media, et cetera?
No, I think that was pretty comprehensive. I'd say maybe in summary then from what I kind of also believe is I think there's definitely the brand awareness play with that brand stores fulfill when it comes to destination, but also from kind of a loyalty perspective as well. So be it cross-selling and upselling existing purchasers or kind of customers already into kind of the broader catalog. But I think David, exactly what you said is what I would have also said.
Nick, can non-endemic brands use a brand store? Or if you hacked around that at all, is that a possibility or is it not?
I don't know exactly about brand stores, but if you think about different verticals and categories, I think automotive is an interesting one to think about. So as opposed to a brand store, they have virtual showrooms now. So I believe the first one that was released in the US was for Kia. I could be, or maybe Hyundai. But I think you're starting to see the assembly of a brand store equivalent for these non-endemic executions. And I think even the influencer programs, celebrity stores are examples of institutions or individuals that don't necessarily sell on Amazon that have their own microsite within Amazon. So That's what I know to be possible. And I think just general nuances to it, but I don't know if they can actually launch a brand store in the same infrastructure of a brand store.
Yeah.
Okay. Get those Progressive Insurance T-shirts for sale. And
I was going to say,
register your brand.
You could sell merchandise, or you could sell gift cards, right? And that would give you a product to then set up a brand store. I think you could do it. It might just be a weird experience because you go to learn more about insurance and you'd see T-shirts for sale. So,
John, as we wrap this up, is there any final question you wanted to ask?
No, that was a weird one to end on. I feel like the time is blown by. I could do this for another 2 hours. So no, Garrett, I'm good if you want to close this out here.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. I mean, honestly, I think that's a great sign. I mean, there's a lot of content here, and I think we can keep going. So we definitely will follow up with future events where we do tackle the same subject. I want to quickly thank all of you panelists, John, the two Nichs, and David. Your guys' expertise is super helpful. All of these, attendees here, I'm sure will have a lot of takeaways today. I also want to thank the attendees for joining. This has been a really great session, and we appreciate you taking time out of your Thursday to come join us for this conversation.
Thanks again for listening to another episode of e-commerce Deep Dive. Be sure to subscribe to your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube. And if you get a chance, go in and leave us a rating. It would help a lot. Thanks again, and talk to you soon.